Mm. Tonight I want to talk about stillness. I feel some amusement about how I often begin these videos looking around going, I wonder when the timing is for when this starts recording. I'm starting to get a little bit of a feeling for it. And tonight there's more for me of a desire to hold the feeling that I want to point at. And as a result, aside from closing this constant thing that keeps asking me to share to groups, every time I start doing this, so much of today, I've watched my mind go through these waves, going through a kind of cycle, this sort of cyclic wave of having a kind of clarity and then sort of getting absorbed in thought. Okay, I responded to somebody who was asking, hey, within a group of people who do a bunch of like a bunch of astrological correspondences and numerology and stuff like that. And the person was saying, hey, here's some neat things for making meaning around Valentine's Day. And I looked at that and I went, well, if I play your game, what would be really true here? What would be the truth? And there's this itch that my mind wants to add. I know all of these little factoids, but she had brought up was some things about how Friday is traditionally, like the reason we call it Friday is after, I think it's Frigg. It's like the goddess's day in most Romance languages. Friday has some version of Dia Veneris, or in French, Vendredi. Veneris um, is the Latin possessive form of Venus. So Dia Veneris literally means Venus's day. You have something like that going for most of the days. All of them have uh, are linked to one of the planets, one of the traditional seven visible planet, which comes from the Greek word for wanderer. The seven visible wandering stars. So on the weekend of Valentine's Day, we have Friday the 12th. That's the Friday, that's the goddess's day. Saturday is the 13th, and there's this association of 13 with also goddess type energy because of the way that women's menstrual cycles seem to match up with the moon, and there are 13 lunar cycles per solar cycle. So 13 is considered to be a feminine number in some circles. And then you have Sunday the 14th being Friday, or being a February the 14th for Valentine's Day. So there's this question of, well, I mean, Valentine's Day feels a lot like Venus, so what do you, like, is this just like a 3-day celebration of Venus? What are we doing here? And so there's this way where, even in just talking about this and feeling into it, I'm having to watch and track what my mind really wants to do here, what it is that I'm trying to do. So my mind likes to run ahead. when reading that post, my mind started zipping along all of these different associations. It's really good at that. Came up with all kinds of significations having to do with all kinds of signs and symbols, because that's sort of the game with this method of making meaning. You sort of notice what things can be associated. You do games like 13 is a sacred feminine number, and 1 plus 3 is 4, which, how does that fit in with that picture? And why are we using base 10? Well, how do you rationalize that? There's like a whole mixing of doing sort of a strange combination of uh, arithmetic or geometry combined with a bunch of meaning making that lets you swap certain symbols back and forth. It's a little bit, it's very flip-floppy. It's very well designed to drive anybody nuts who has a really rich background with technical thinking. Like if you're a programmer or a mathematician or a physicist, then this way of thinking will just drive you up the wall. I had to learn how to be able to think in all of these ways and be able to sort of speak many languages. There's this kind of urgency that I notice, this sort of urgency that shows up of, how do I associate? How do I offer more insight? So like flashing through my mind was, I'd been staring at how a thing that should get astrologers really excited is that all of the visible planets are clustering together. All of them except Mars are all clustering together in the same part of the sky in February. And this is supposed to mean something. So sort of poking them a little bit, going, so what do you predict? And there's a bit of an impishness to it. Oh, what do you predict? Want to put your prediction on the line? Do you want to risk your art? It's a little mean, but it's mostly the trickster playfulness. It's mostly kind of nudging, going, hey, you don't have to be restrained this way. Give it a go. So noticing the way that my mind wants to run ahead, wants to make all of these associations. A lot of it is, it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful to see all of these interconnections and see how they all link together. The way that when you put on the astrological net, there's actually a very clean movement having to do with February basically beginning and ending with the movement of Venus across the bounds that astrologers have decided are the parts of the celestial dome that are important to pay attention to, the cusps of the signs. And seeing that, it's just like, oh, okay. So what do you make of it? And so I find myself returning again and again and aiming to embody a particular feeling here. I notice I'm being much less explicitly coherent than I usually prefer to be. I'm trying to gesture towards a certain feeling, this certain essence. If I am very quick and I quickly toss thoughts together and I'm trying to fire these thoughts off, I mean, that can be useful as long as I've computed these thoughts well and they're grounded well in the present moment. They're actually rooted in the material, in what matters in the body. If they're rooted here, then I can fire off those thoughts very quickly. You get me going about mimetic evolution. I have a lot of thoughts about that, and it's very, very alive. But what is the process of rooting? What does it mean to have the mind grounded? to be in service of truth, not just following correct pathways according to it, but to actually orient. I was initially going to rant about a particular challenge I ran into from watching a TV show. I'm just now noticing that actually I think that the thing that I'm picking up on there that's key is actually relevant to what I'm talking about. There's sort of a Shakespearean drama that keeps getting reapplied over and over and over again. In this case, I was watching the 2017 the reboot of DuckTales. As a kid, I used to watch the old version of DuckTales in the 80s and early 90s. I think just the 80s. And so it's just neat to see, oh, somebody came back and created a series with a plot and interesting writing. I wonder what they did with this. I'm actually enjoying it quite a lot. It's a very silly show. I refer to it as the Silly Duck Show. It's just wonderful to be able to say it's a silly duck show. I'm going to watch DuckTales. There's an episode I started watching last night that I ended up just stopping watching about 5 minutes in. Eventually, I will stomach my way through it because I like the overall arc of the plot, and I know that they'll resolve this pretty quickly. There's a very particular sort of drama that will literally drive me out of the room. It has this, so in this case, Donald Duck is meeting up with his buddies, and they're the Three Caballeros. Like, this is playing off of that old cartoon of the three of them singing, the three caballeros, they say we are birds of a feather. And they have this whole thing where Donald's always always looking ridiculous in the background. But anyway, so supposedly, so it's like this, so the three of them are getting together, and the engine of the plot is that the other two turn out to be fantastically successful and influencers and world travelers and have tons of fans and are very, very successful. And the biggest challenge is that they are so successful that it can be exhausting to address so much love from so many fans. And then they turn to Donald and say, "So what have you been doing? Surely it's been amazing." And he runs and hides and gets support from a couple of other characters who are checking in with him, and he's going, I can't deal with this. I can't, they'll think I'm such a failure, and then they're going to find out I'm a failure. And their plan is to coordinate some kind of story as though he's actually really successful. And you sort of know where this is going. It's like every plot like this, the whole thing is truth won't let him get away with that, but he needs to be beaten with shame and embarrassment and near misses and having to struggle to lie to his friends in order to pull off this impression. For what? So this is a type of plot device that once I recognize it on the TV, there's an amount of pain and discomfort in my stomach that will just drive me right out of the room. And then when I pause, and I feel into the stillness, then it's a lot easier to sort out, well, what is going on? What is so difficult about this? Then I can feel things like the way that plays with a kind of an anxiety in my belly. I don't have to get lost in it. I don't have to go, oh, I've got this anxiety, and it's like, I've got this, and it sort of bubbles up, and it's creating these feelings and these thoughts, but what's going on there? How do I make sense of it? Because that's not like that. It's like too much movement, or that's not quite what I mean. There's no such thing as too much movement, but if the movement doesn't have the context of the stillness, there's no way to orient. There's no place to put my feet. So when exploring something like, oh, I get very triggered by this, I get really overwhelmed. I always have. Well, almost always. I think there was some kind of shift where when I became a teenager, this became a much bigger issue. Um, and being able to pause and actually just go, wait, what's here? Then the noise of the mind can't hide the truth of what that anxiety is. I can just feel it. I can be with it. It's the same stillness that lets my eyes rest here. Instead of, trying to see all these scattered different thoughts and, kind of like maybe occasionally checking back in, but I don't think that just stopping and not talking is like the right way for all conversation to be. I remember seeing a lot of people who've gone into spirituality doing this thing of spending long time without any context staring at the camera, like, feeling so spiritual. I think I understand it a lot better now. But I also think it's possible to cultivate a kind of context and to offer that a little more clearly. When I'm pausing here, I'm slowing down to notice these gaps between thought and working on expanding them so that the program that is the mind doesn't run and then make everything so busy that I can't orient. I've spent years lost in thought and in chains of thought that would move my body with anxiety. And I don't want to get lost that way again. So I check in with this stillness. In the description, I talk about, here is a koan. I've referenced this before in this series. I want to point at this again. If I ask you what it feels like for your shirt to move with your breath, there are two directions to go to answer that question. One is down into the sensation. Okay, that's one direction. And that answers the question. It doesn't give me the answer, but you know the answer. The other direction is up into the mind, where you go, well, like when I breathe, my lungs expand and it's going to move my shirt in a particular way, because my chest is a bit larger than my abdomen, then I expect this to kind of like pull it away and maybe tickle some of the hairs that are around there. And going up tends to disconnect from sensation. It doesn't have to, but there's a general tendency for it to do so. It works better, it's a bit faster if it disconnects from sensation. It's using the mind. The problem with going up into the mind is that once you're up there, it can be hard to remember that you've done that unless you tell your mind to remind you and to pop you back down into the sensation level. Most of us have learned to stay away from the sensation level. To be honest, I don't actually know if it's most. Most of the people I encounter seem to have this attribute. I definitely do. I see the evidence of it overwhelmingly on net for the human race. But this could be sort of like how it looks almost like everybody is screaming about politics all the time on the internet. But in practice, it might only be like 5% of the population. I don't know what percentage, but it could be quite small, and it just looks loud because they're the ones screaming. But whatever the truth is, for what proportion, there's this potential to get lost. A lot of people are programmed. You can observe that very clearly, that a lot of people are programmed to disconnect from their senses and then forget that they've done so, to stay disconnected, the basic pattern of trauma. So what kind of move would make going down more accessible? Not that staying down, staying out of thought is the best thing to do, but not being able to ground back in the physical world, that's dangerous. It is literally the danger of psychosis. It produces, on the macro scale, it produces the global chaos we're in. On the micro scale, it produces suffering. To not be able to ground, to not be able to see what is true even when you look for it. But when I ask, well, but what is going on with my relationship with my girlfriend? And when I ask that, instead of asking and then going down into feeling what happens in me when I ask that question, what do I know is true? In particular, what do I know is true that I have not been willing to think consciously? Can I just look? That's going down. But the tendency is to go up into babble. Well, like we have these kinds of interactions and we've said these things, but can I trust it? I mean, she's done this stuff before, but here's some other ideas about how she works, and there's these, like, so in order to grow roots into truth, in order to build the capacity to go down, how do we do that? Well, there's a bit of a paradox where that question is best answered by going down. And a very simple way to access that is to just stop. So just stop. Take a breath. Make the exhale a little longer than the inhale. It's a cute physiological trick. It stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. And then when there is enough stillness that there isn't as much jerking up to the level of mind, but instead there can be a, okay. Then, like a pinprick, like a single click of a ticking clock. There's a precision that is visible, it's audible, it's experientable. If we grow roots in stillness, we learn how to stay low. We learn how to drop into sensation. And then it becomes much more possible to build a bridge so that the mind's use reconfigures to anchor in truth. The main thing, if you've watched all the way through this has probably been one of my, arguably my weirdest video so far. Arguably. Because I'm not actually trying to make sure that the intellectual content makes sense. I'm putting a little energy into it because I actually care about the mind's experience of this. I want the mental interface with the somatic to become smooth, for the integration to be whole. Because the mind is sort of the novel power of the human race. But the bridge has to be built in both directions. What I want to do is invite you into a certain kind of feeling. So you can feel the truth of it. This is not an intellectual argument. This is not for the mind, because the move that I'm inviting you to explore is not a cognitive move. It's not a question of what you think. It's not a question of what you believe. It is a question of slowing down enough to notice reality. Can you rest in the absolute stillness at the center of everything? To feel the nothing. If you can, and you choose to, I mean, you can, all of us can, we're guaranteed to. That's part of why it has such resonance with death. If we just hold still and let go. My experience is that the more I do this, the more capable I am of seeing each little piece tick by. That feeling makes it a lot easier to see what the mind needs in order to reconfigure and become fully enmeshed with the desire and preference for truth. So, what I would encourage here is, don't worry so much about the ideas in this video. Notice how you feel. Notice if there's a glimmer of something that you can maybe access. What would happen if you sort of breathe into that? I mentioned koans. These are Zen riddles. What is the sound of one hand clapping? So the no end of jokes. What was your face before your parents were born? The point of puzzles like this is not that you think about them. It's not that you go up. It's that you go down. For most Western minds, that's kind of bafflement. How do you look at the sensory level as an answer to the question, what did my face look like before my parents were born? But the reason it drives Western minds nuts is because Western minds go up. They yank the question and say, how does that even make sense? What's the logic? Like, where's the sensor? I don't understand the model. But that's a property of the mind. One sign that you are going down is that you are actually more calm. If you feel agitated in the act of trying to answer a question, this is an indication of having booted up the mind. Again, this is not a bad thing. It just leads to suffering and confusion if you don't even notice this has happened. So how do you come to notice? By slowing down, by growing roots deep into the soil of stillness, letting the darkness of nothing nourish you deeply. Then when your branches grow outward and you grow open the leaves that take in the brilliant, clear light of truth. You can't get bowled over. Nothing can break that relationship. You'll see it. This is part of a continuing effort to stumble around the transmission. I think that seems to be the thing in the circles that I find myself partially surrounded by lately. They talk about transmission and holding an energy comes through you. And when the energy comes through you, what message wants to come through? Part of it is me learning how to translate. Using that paradigm, using that framing. It's as though I'm receiving a message and I'm trying to translate it. A different way of saying it is, there is something that is essential to how I function, something I see very clearly, and I'm learning how to describe it clearly and how to embody it clearly at the same time. So before I talked about clear knowing, I may try again, because I think I can get the mental side clearer, and it's important to. What I have to say and what I have to bring is about clarity. This will take a few iterations. This is an iteration on the other side, working specifically with the somatic side, the energetic feeling side of what kind of thing it means to practice clear knowing, to cultivate it, to let that resonance grow. I don't imagine this made a lot of sense. If it did, cool. But hopefully it feels sense. It is sensible, even if it doesn't make sense. I think that's it. Thank you for listening.